One of the things that I have learned is that first-generation low-income kids, I think, can benefit from a humanized education. What we have, unfortunately, today in many classrooms, from K-12 to higher ed, is an education that is somewhat dehumanized, where the teacher remains separate from the students, where the students are learning, but they're not really engaged deeply with the subject matter, where personal experience doesn't count, and where students are really not seen as full human beings. It's all about educating the mind with little to no attention with regard to everything else that the student is, a social, emotional, and spiritual human being. I think that a holistic approach to education can really benefit low-income first-generation students, because I think that this is the kind of education that Barbara Jaffe, who's featured in my book, she teaches English at El Camino College in California, and she said, give these students something that will spark them, something that's really going to get them interested in what they're doing, and where they say, wow, this is a really powerful learning experience for me. If we approach the teaching and learning environment in a detached way, in one where the faculty member cannot feel free to bring who he or her is into the classroom, and where students can't do that either, where students are reading for knowledge and information without really addressing the deeper aspects of themselves, without getting into something that's beyond knowledge. I'm talking about wisdom here. Then I think these kinds of students are going to be turned off by this sort of detached, dehumanized education.
And is there any way people can prepare themselves to teach this way? Does the book address this issue?
Well, the book is written for people who really want to embrace this approach. And so I was very careful to go through, I think, some of the step-by-step things that people need to know about. In particular, I believe it's the chapter before the last that addresses these issues. I think one of the things that would be helpful is if the faculty member had a contemplative practice of their own. And one of the things I had to do in terms of doing the research for this book is not to just say, well, I'm gonna interview these faculty to see what they do, I'm gonna write it up. That's not enough. I had to embrace the approach. So I had to take risks in the classroom in terms of including contemplative practice with my own teaching and learning approaches. But I too have a contemplative practice of my own. I do meditation. I've been trained in transcendental meditation. I have moments of silence. I was open to experiences that allowed me to think more deeply about what I was doing. There were times that there was an impasse in terms of what I was wanting to say, and I just had to step back. And one of the preparations is having an openness to this, and just having the time to think more deeply about what we're trying to do as educators, and it requires these moments of silence. You don't have to have a meditation practice, but just setting aside time to maybe write a poem, or to listen to music, or to listen to the snow, or take a walk, or take a jog, and just to let things just seep in, and for us to take them in at a deeper level.
What kind of risks does this kind of teaching pose for the teacher?
I think that this kind of teaching, a Sentipensante approach, a sensing thinking approach, requires a great deal of preparation from the teacher. This is not something that can be done by anyone. There's work involved. It's like if we teach diversity, it's like you can't just go in there and do it. You've got to read about it. You've got to think about it. You've got to embrace it. Like any teaching and learning approach, it's not perfect for everyone. And I'd rather that people not do it if they're not going to do it right, or they really don't care about it. But a teacher needs to know that a sensing thinking approach in the classroom will elicit emotion. Will have students perhaps long for more time from the instructor, where students might cry in class or become emotional with an assignment. I remember one of the faculty members that I interviewed, Norma Cantu, who teaches writing at the University of Texas at San Antonio, and she talked to me about using photographs in the classroom, personal photographs where students look at a photo and write from that photo. And she talks about how one of her students selected a photo of her and her siblings with her mother. And as she got into that writing assignment, the student couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. And she came back and her eyes were puffed up, and she told Norma, "You have helped me to know my mother." And those are the kinds of powerful learning experiences that faculty who are going to embrace this approach need to be ready for. And so this requires preparation. This requires the instructor being not just an instructor, but someone that can relate to people, a human being. It requires compassion. It requires someone who's going to embrace the student as a whole learner. And so, some people may look at that as a risk. I look at it as
a chapter on assessment in the book.
Yes.
And I think that people undertaking this kind of practice need, I think, reassurance that there's academic rigor in all this. How do you want to respond or talk about that issue?
It's interesting that when we present this kind of work, people are always thinking something has, there's something wrong here. You're not being rigorous enough, or something's going to fall apart. I can tell you that none of the faculty that I interviewed sacrificed standards, and I consider myself one of them. I am them and they are me, and you can ask any of my students, and actually, as one faculty member told me, my standards are as high, if not higher, than what everybody else does here, because what we're doing here is going beyond knowledge. It's really engaging the student. It's giving them something that is sparking them. It's really an education designed to bring out the best in a broad way. So faculty did traditional things. I give tests, they give tests, I give papers, they have students write papers. But what we did that goes beyond that is we had the students engage more deeply in the material through the contemplative practice in the classroom. For example, in leadership courses, I've had my students construct mandalas that typify how they see themselves as a leader. In a research course that I taught to doctoral students, I had them construct a research cajita. This is a concept that I borrowed from one of the people that I interviewed, Alberto Pulido, who uses cajitas, little sacred boxes that students built, and I asked the students to think about their research in a deeper fashion. Who had inspired them to get into doctoral study? Why were they doing this research? What impact did they want this study to have? And I can tell you that when they present those cajitas, and I presented mine as well, by the end of the class, there was not a dry eye in the class. And these are the kinds of powerful moments that, with everything that I taught in that class, from statement of the problem to theoretical framework, we covered everything, to findings, etc. I think that 20 years from now, they're going to remember the research cajita.
Okay. I think that's great, Laura. I think that